Cahir women, famine and pre-famine. There is ample evidence that, in spite of a level of prosperity not seen by many other towns, Cahir had its own share of famine afflictions and suffering during the years of the Great Famine, 1845 to 1850. Cahir electoral division and several neighbouring parishes were all part of Cahir Union, and it was to Cahir workhouse, 10 miles distant, that Cahir destitute men, women and children were obliged to go when the country was overwhelmed during those cataclysmic years of famine. One official report revealed in 1849 that a majority of the inmates at the workhouse were from Cahir electoral division. It can be argued that famine conditions were already in the country before the Great Famine of 1845 to 1850 began its deadly work, and there is certainly evidence that the poorer women of Cahir were experiencing famine circumstances in the decades leading up to the Great Famine. In a report on the employment of the poor in Ireland, compiled in July 1823, Lady Glengall of Cahir informed the commissioners that in regard to the employment of women, they are in a state of great destitution. They are perfectly naked as to clothing, and without any comfort or convenience, or any possible way of gaining their livelihood. And unfortunately they see people naked and with nothing in the world but a blanket to sleep on, without a bed to lie on, and they are so used to seeing it that they are not sensible that that is not the usual and proper way for them to exist. In April of 1846, following descriptions in the press of the destitution in Cahir area, an investigative reporter from the Freeman's Journal visited Cahir, where he met Reverend Stephen Lonergan. Father Lonergan gave a very deplorable account of the wretchedness that prevails in and about the town. The reporter confirmed the description and wrote, "This, coupled with my own observation, leaves no doubt of the fact. Destitution outside of the town was also dreadful. Many had no food, while others had barely enough for a couple of weeks. Women and children were among the groups that recently attacked the flour cars bringing the flour away from Cahir mills, causing the mill owners to apply for military escorts. It is noteworthy that the military men whose duties included escorting the flour carts away from Cahir's mills were not found wanting at a later stage when fundraising was necessary to sustain the lives of the poor. In 1849, the troops from Cahir military barracks put on theatrical presentations in Cahir to raise funds for charity. They distributed wagons of bread, and it was reported that the troops are so generous and humane as to subscribe 2 pence each weekly for the benevolent fund. Prior to the establishment of the official soup kitchens in 1847, charitable food distribution centres had already been set up in the Cahir area, mostly by members of the Society of Friends, in 1846. For the starving women in the Cahir area and their families, it was obviously destitution that drove them to the soup kitchens. For the more affluent women of Cahir, it was a deep sense of decency, charity and benevolence that brought them there. The destitute women and the affluent women being brought together, possibly for the first time in their lives, by the cataclysmic circumstances which existed at the time. On 3 days of the week, the Countess of Glengall attended, with others, while bread and soup were being distributed in Cahir to 205 families, comprising 1,028 individuals. A September 1848 edition of the Limerick Reporter made reference to the thriving members of the Society of Friends at Cahir and wrote, "Evidence of their ever-active benevolence and untiring industry encounter you in every direction." The generosity of the Quakers, Society of Friends throughout Ireland, was instrumental in maintaining life for many thousands of people. At Tincurry, Cahir, before the auxiliary workhouse was established there, the Friends had established a porridge kitchen. So too in Cahir, where Mrs. Grubb and the Ladies' Committee had set up a soup kitchen prior to the establishment of the official soup kitchens. Although the poor women and the affluent women would have met at the soup kitchens and other places where charity was distributed, it can be stated with a degree of certainty that the poor and destitute women of Cahir and district were not mingling with the attendees at Cahir steeplechase races in September 1845, which were under the stewardship of Lord Waterford, the Earl of Glengall, the Honourable C. O'Callaghan and many other gentlemen from the area. Neither would the impoverished women of Cahir have been invited to the grand picnic in July 1846 at the Earl of Glengall's Romantic Lodge, which was given by the officers of the 8th Royal Irish Hussars to all the gentry of the surrounding neighbourhood, where the happy scene was further enlivened by the charming music of the Band of the 8th. The Cahir races in April 46 at the splendid course on the Earl of Glengall's Kilcommon domain were presumably also off limits to the impoverished women. And what, one wonders, would the starving mothers have made of the Cahir Grand Steeplechase in October of 1846, which was followed that evening by a ball and supper on a very magnificent scale. The starving women of Cahir would instead have made their way to the Union Workhouse, where they were separated from their families and possibly exposed to the further risk of disease. In the 1849 official report referred to above, the majority of the destitute poor women in the Cahir Union Workhouse at the date of the report were sadly destitute women from Cahir.